Hey there, welcome. We are just a few seconds away from getting started. Thank you for being on time tonight. That is so cool. It's great when people are on time because it means we get to start and dive right in. I'd love it if you take just a moment, please, and find the chat box and drop me just a hello in the chat box. This is going to be a little bit interactive. I'm going to want you to be responding to questions and even asking questions. And so if you know how to use the chat box, you're going to get a lot more out of this. So if you'll take a moment, find that webinar chat box, get in there and just say hi, just so I know that you've got that. Hello, Tennille. You're welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Devin from BC. Great. Sandra. Hello. Yes, yes, this is great. This is very good. So good to see so many people on the call already. Excellent. Love it, love it, love it. All right, now what you will find, and truthfully, you will find this, is that when I ask for interaction, the more interaction you give me, the more you're going to get out of me. If I think you're sleeping, I'm going to go to sleep too, right? Pretty easy stuff. You feed me, I'll feed you. It'll all work out beautifully. So I want you to know that tonight I'm not selling anything. I am going to be talking about a course during our time together today, but I'm not selling it on this webinar. So if you're thinking you're going to get high pressured into something, just put your mind at ease and put that thought aside. I hope you brought a pen and paper so that you could take notes. That's just going to be really important because I'm going to teach you some things that you can use with your very next client. How does that sound? Now, I know from, and I want to know if that sounds good. If you want to be able to use a little bit of iridology with your very next client, let me know in the chat box. I know from how this was promoted that you all have nutrition training of some sort, right? Because I promoted this through CanPro, which is one of my favorite organizations for nutrition. I too am a professional member of CanPro. And so we are amongst friends here. We're all hopefully speaking the same language. All right. So quick disclaimer here, Cobblestone Health Limited, doing business as Iridology Education, is not responsible for any results, good or bad, you get from using this information that I'm going to share with you. You alone are responsible for the results you get. If you use iridology, you are responsible to have the appropriate liability insurance. You are required to respect and adhere to local laws regarding required credentials for the use of iridology and the offering of nutritional or supplement advice. Now, I want to tell you, if you're a member of CanPro and you have your liability insurance through CanPro, they do have the option to include iridology, and it's not a modality where you pay extra to add it into your insurance. So that's really cool. That's really cool. So let's talk about why you're here tonight. I know you're interested in iridology. Okay, I already know that. We're all good with that one. But are you also maybe looking for a low invasive way to assess your clients? Because as nutritionists, we don't get to run a lot of tests, do we? And so are you looking for that? Are you looking for, you've maybe studied iridology before, but it's not working for you? You feel like you must be doing something wrong? Or are you just curious and you want a low commitment way to investigate iridology further? If I've missed your reason for coming tonight, drop it in the chat box. Let me know if you've got a different reason from one of these for being with us tonight. And we're going to take a little look at these reasons too. So anyone here for a reason other than 1, 2, or 3? If you are, just let me know. Just put different reason in the chat box. And maybe if you want to send it to me privately so that I can make sure that I address your needs tonight. I can do this on the fly. This is one of my favorite little mini webinars to put on. Just curious, not in practice currently. Sandra, thank you for that. That is so great, so great. Okay, just curious works for me. So if you've heard about or experienced iridology as a diagnostic tool, and you're looking for a low invasive way to assess your clients, that's a really good reason for being here. You may be surprised to learn that iridology can save you hours of time. When I teach iridology, I teach it at a professional level that will allow you to do a solid and appropriate assessment with program creation in 20 minutes. Now, your appointments are more than 20 minutes long, and no one wants to be rushed out of the office after 20 minutes. So what's that going to do for you? It's going to leave you 40 minutes, if your appointments are 1 hour long, to develop rapport and to let your client feel very heard. So I encourage you to start learning what you're going to use today. use it right away. And when you're enrolled in the actual course eventually, I actually get you to start using what you're learning by the time we have our second out of 20 lessons. I want you using it and implementing it and working with it. It will start saving you time just that quickly, right? If you can look at someone's eyes and you know from looking at their eyes that they tend to run too acidic, and you know what their symptoms are, that they've got respiratory issues with a lot of mucus, or they're inflamed with arthritis, or they've got any kind of an inflammatory process, you know that has its base in acid. You see the genetic predisposition in their eyes. That's going to help you then to do an even sharper job of figuring out what their diet should be and teaching them why their diet should be that way. Iridology is also wonderful for developing rapport and helping you to gather other pertinent information. And the bonus is that when we do iridology the way I teach it, it will encourage clients to come back for follow-up appointments. I have clients who have been with me literally since the beginning. I will introduce myself more later on to tell you when the beginning was, but seriously, I've got clients that have been with me that long. How many of you have maybe studied iridology already? Let me know in the chat box if you've studied it. I'm just always curious to know how many of my attendees are sort of initiated, if you will. Devin has a little bit. Excellent. Thank you. Anybody else? This is something I take really seriously. If you studied it and it's not working for you, and some of you are being very quiet tonight already. We need to fix that. I take this very seriously because if you've studied iridology and you feel like it's not working for you, that is not your fault. I've had many students who were previously certified by other instructors, but they weren't taught how to use iridology in clinical practice. They were taught how to do iridology as case studies. Those are two very different things. A case study will eat up your time and it will actually discourage clients from ever coming back, right? We want to do this as appointments, as on the spot kind of work, right? I've actually had students also say that their teachers told them that that after they've done these certification courses that, oh yeah, you'll figure out how to use it. You'll figure out your own way. And I think that's kind of like throwing someone who doesn't know how to swim into the deep end of the pool. How many of them are actually going to make it back to the edge of the pool without a little help, right? So I really firmly believe that I should give you a starting platform of this is how I use it. Once you've experienced that, then you can begin to morph that into something that is yours, right? So I really believe in giving my students a starting point. Students feel like they've failed because they've studied the skill, but they don't know how to use it. And I don't let my students do that. I mentor my students that are in my certification program so that they will feel confident. The goal here is not just to teach you a course and take your money and run. The goal is to teach you a skill that you can use confidently. So I include the teaching side, the application side of this. That doesn't mean that you will use it exactly the way I teach it to you, but it does mean that you've got a starting point. So if you're already trained in iridology, but you're lacking in confidence, or you want to add iridology to your knowledge then, and you want to be mentored in that, we'll talk about what that looks like. For those of you who are just curious and you want a low commitment way to investigate this further, totally fair. You know, when I went to university as a young adult, I applied to 2 different universities. They were both excellent. They were both, one was about 1,200 miles away from home, and the other was about 1,500 miles away from home. And I was accepted to both of them. Now that's, I don't know what it's like to get into university now, but one of them was a little bit harder to get into, but I got in without too much problem. The one that won out, however, was the one that invited me down for a weekend several months before school was supposed to start, so they could show me around the campus. They could introduce me to some of the professors. They could show me what this was going to be like if I went to their school. Now, I personally feel that it's really important for you to have a campus tour, for you to have the opportunity to speak with the teacher, me, right? To see what the course would be like, and from there to decide if it's a good fit. I think you should have an opportunity to see what kinds of learning materials are available in the course. And so if these are the kinds of reasons why you're here, you're maybe looking for a course and you're starting to sound things out, then consider this your opportunity to interview me for the job, right? Seriously, that way. So this is an interactive open house. And I've got a lot to share with you. And I see that Sharon was trying to find a pen. So this is great, Sharon. I hope you found one. I hope everybody's got a way to take notes because we are going to be looking at some legit iridology tonight. I'm going to be asking for you to ask questions. I'm going to be asking you questions. And again, I'd like to see some input here. Iridology is a powerful assessment tool. Confidence can be nurtured and developed. All right, so now that we figured out why you're here, let me introduce myself, please. My name is Judith Cobb. I am one of 10 level 3 certified iridology instructors in the world. Level 10 is the highest level there is. I was actually one of the first 3 to certify at this level. The International Iridology Practitioners Association started issuing badges a few years ago, so these are just the last few we've had. With this, I've been in the holistic health industry since 1981. You can do the math and figure out how old you think I might be. One of these days, I'll start a little lottery and we'll see who comes the closest, and I don't know what they'll get, but they'll get something fun. I started teaching about herbs and nutrition only a few years later because there was a lack of readily available information here in Calgary. Right? There were very few herbal books in print. There certainly wasn't the self-help section there is in the bookstores nowadays. I started my health journey at the age of 20 when I had health problems that the doctors just couldn't seem to sort out. And of course, there were no holistic nutritionists back then, and my mother and father wouldn't have known how to access one anyways. They were very medically oriented. I was still in university when I was having these health problems, and I was studying to be a school teacher, but I ended up dropping out of university to get married. And I was only 2 semesters away from graduating as a school teacher. But I also realized in that I was not going to be happy teaching children. It was something that I thought I always wanted to do. My grandmother was a school teacher. My dad was a school teacher. I was sure that this was in my DNA. And instead of teaching children, I now get to teach adults. And I get to teach them things that I really love and believe in. And that's how I've ended up here. In addition to being an IPA certified iridology instructor, I'm also a member of the CAN Pro and CAN P nutrition organizations. And I know you all know about CAN Pro. And I'm also a professional member of the Alberta Herbalist Association. Just want to drop some little tidbits here from some of my students who have graduated and certified. Karen Choate, who is a CNHP, specializing in digestive health. How many people do we have with us who specialize in digestive health? Do any of you specifically work on digestive issues? If you do, just let me know while we're reading this. So Karen said, I just returned from a regenerative detox course where iridology is implemented. I spread the word about what a wonderful teacher you are. Most people I taught with did not have anywhere near the same experience with their iridology education. They had no support, unanswered questions, and a lot of confusion. Mostly they finished their classes not knowing how to implement what they had learned. I feel so absolutely blessed to have been taught by you. I feel totally supported, even still as I've graduated. It's almost 5 years ago now. I don't think there's anyone out there practicing, educating, and teaching iridology like you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm eternally grateful for your never-ending patience and support. So that is lovely, and it's nice to hear nice things, but I wanted to know, how did this actually change her practice? So I asked her that in our social media group. We were on Facebook back then, and she said, iridology has helped me to understand the relationships between different organs and organ systems more in depth. Iridology also gives me an advantage of seeing the potential for different genetic traits and qualities that may be underlying. By observing the constitution, for example, you can extrapolate how the person's body will likely respond to applications of healing methods. Therefore, it has helped me to expand my knowledge and increased efficiency at providing more precise recommendations for health-oriented options. All right, so this is cool because she had no iridology training before she came to me, and she just launched, and she's doing beautifully. So stay with me to the end of today's workshop, and I'll share with you more about the exact course that Karen took with me. in order for us to understand what iridology is, it's important for us to understand a bit about where it came from and how it developed. But we're going to do this really fast because I know we really just want to start looking at eyes, right? That's why you're here. You want to look at eyes. So iridology is rooted in India, Egypt, India, China, and Greece. Now, we know that science evolves. Science is not the end game. It is the mid game. It is the asking questions. So, we used to think, well, some people used to think the earth was flat. I personally think it's round. And I think there's enough proof saying that it is round. The same is happening with iridology. It started out about 200 years ago, and it has continued to develop. There's been more and more research. There's a lot of research happening in this field right now, and it's pretty exciting stuff to see changes happening. It started in 1826 with Ignaz van Petzschly. He was a little boy, and there were things that happened in his youth as a young boy that made him want to become a medical doctor. As a medical doctor, he would study his patients, and he wondered if the eyes had anything to do with anything here. And so he started drawing their eyes in whatever colored charcoals or whatever they used, and writing out their stories, and began to correlate. Well, when I see something in this part of the eye, they're always complaining of this kind of a problem. And so he gradually drew out what was the foundation for the iridology maps we use nowadays. He was right on target. Then we have Pastor Neil Lilliquist, 1851 to 1936. And he determined, and we'll look at some of this as we go, he determined that fiber density equaled health resiliency. So when you look at somebody's eyes, easiest to see in blue eyes, and we'll look at some blue eyes tonight, when they've got a lot of threads in their eyes, the more threads they have, the more resilient their body is. Pastor Emmanuel Falca started defining the constitutions, and we're going to actually look at constitutions a little bit tonight. He determined that people that have blue eyes are more prone to certain problems. People that have dark brown eyes are more prone to other problems. People that have the hazel type of eyes are prone to different problems. It's interesting. I just read some studies the other day that showed that in the medical world, they know that people that have blue eyes respond to certain medications in a particular way that is different from people that have brown eyes. So anyone in the medical world who says there is nothing to iridology isn't even keeping up with some of their own research. Rudolf Schnabel researched pigment and pupil tonus. So he was one who looked at eyes and said, this eye is mostly blue, but it has lots of yellow and orange flecks in it. Or this eye is mostly brown, but it's got some darker brown patches in it. And he figured out what those different colors meant. He also looked at pupil size and shape. That's what we mean by tonus. And he was able to ascertain that certain shapes of the pupil, if it was flat on certain sides, or if it was elliptical, if it was slightly oblong, if it was big, if it was little, each of those things gave us information about that particular person. Gave us information not so much as in a diagnosis, but helped us to understand their body better so that we would understand the symptoms we were seeing, and we could combine that with asking the client questions to come up with good solutions. Our goal here is actually not to diagnose. We don't want to name disease. We want to understand the body so that we understand how to work with it. Does that make sense? That we're not going to diagnose? If that makes sense, give me a makes sense in the comments box. Let me know if that makes sense. I like what Rudolf Schnabel said, because this was so important, even way, way back then. So we're talking of 75 to 100 years ago. He said it was no easy task, and those who believe or would like to believe that handling iridoscopy or iridology could be learned within a few weeks or even days are mistaken and do a disservice to a good cause. And so that's exactly why when I teach, I'll never teach this as a weekend workshop. It's a 50-hour course, and we spread that over 20 weeks so that you've got time to study, learn, practice, implement, figure out what questions you have before you come back to learn more, right? So important, so important. We've got more European, so much was going on in Europe. Joseph Unger was a student of Schnabel's. He became a naturopath, but he was concerned that every person who was doing iridology research was creating their own language. and was defining things in their own way. And he just wanted everybody to come to a consensus so that we'd have one language. We're still working on that. He also knew, and this has led to a lot of problems, he knew that people were publishing theories before they'd had done any studies. And we see this as a problem today, that there are still people who are teaching those theories from 100 to 150 years ago. The difference is now we know those theories are incorrect, but there's a lot of people teaching them as if they are gospel true, right? And so we want to be aware of what we're seeing, what we're studying, and we want to keep up with modern research. Does that make sense, that we should keep up with current research and that we should adapt our practice and our beliefs based on legit research? Yeah, Janice says, yeah. Yeah, thanks for that, Jana. I appreciate that. I agree. I think it's critical for people who are professional to keep up with the research and to be willing to evolve with the research, right? Yeah, this is science changes and evolves, and so should we, says Tennille. Absolutely. So true. Joseph Deck, we're going to hear more about him as we go. He published books about constitutional iridology. So he was another researcher on the Constitution, blue eyes versus hazel eyes versus brown eyes versus different patterns we see in the eyes versus different color flecks we see in the eyes. He did some beautiful work on that kind of research, which we really appreciated. And then we've got Theodore Kriega, who also felt that iridology was the #1 assessment tool, but he wanted it backed up with other things. As beautiful as iridology is, he said, you're always best if you've got 2 or 3 things pointing to the same problem. So if you can do urine analysis or hand analysis or fingernails or tongue or feces, or there's an analysis style that is about studying the skin and the lines on the soles of the feet, right? If you can combine your iridology with 1 or 2 or 3 of those other sciences, that's brilliant. Now, of course, we can back that up with medical tests if our clients are bringing in test reports for us. In North America, we've got Bernard Jensen. We love Bernard. He only passed away 24 years ago. I never had the chance to meet him, but I know people who did. And my original iridology instructor had studied with him a couple of times. He kept iridology alive. The information he had was mostly the things that have now been disproved, which is very sad. But he did a lot of good for a lot of people. People would come to him at his ranch in Escondido. They'd been to the Mayo Clinic. They were told things like, you've got 3 weeks to live, go home and get your affairs in order. And instead, they would take a detour through Escondido, which was probably not on the beaten path. And Dr. Jensen would coach them. He would teach them. He would help them understand their nutritional needs. Oh, there's nutrition. Cool. And people got better. They didn't die. They got better. His assessment as a chiropractor, he did the body work, but he also had his iridology. When he was very elderly, he connected with Harry Wolf and Bill Cardona. They actually reached out to him. We're going to tell you some stories about Harry and Bill. And he gave them his absolute blessing. He said, all the work that you are doing with iridology, it's different from what I did, and it's beautiful work that you are doing. Please keep doing it. Please help iridology to move forward. So Harry was an American-born German. He could read and speak German fluently. He got a hold of one of the Joseph Deck books that was about iridology that was in German. And Harry was a massage therapist. I think he did some other holistic therapies as well. And he really glommed onto this. This made sense to him. So he started teaching what he knew in just little weekend workshops, because that's, it was just a book he was working from. He connected with Bill Cardona, who at the time was a registered pharmacist. And Bill fell in love with this. And Bill studied the Deck books, and he went and he began teaching iridology at Bastyr Naturopathic College in Seattle. And they had an iridology program there for quite a few years. Bill later on went on to become a naturopath, but Harry and Bill worked together to bring constitutional iridology to the forefront. And, we're still working to get it right up to the forefront. Bill was my constitutional teacher. I'm still in touch with him. Bless his heart. He still tolerates really weird questions from me. I think everybody needs a mentor. And that is why I mentor my students the way Bill has mentored me. I just appreciate his time so desperately. The three kinds of iridology that are practiced in North America: Jensen, Rayid, and constitutional. We'll talk a little bit about each of these. We'll spend most of our time on constitutional, though. So Jensenian was originally taught by Bernard Jensen. It taught that the iris changes when the body changes, that you would see healing lines, so new fibers would develop in the eyes, that if there were openings in the eyes called lacunae, well, he called them lesions, that if you did all the right things, those would disappear. Now, have any of you heard things like that? That we could change your eye color, for instance, if you do a cleanse? Have you heard that? Have you seen people on social media saying, your eyes, oh, you're full of toxins? Have you seen that? You need to do this cleanse, buy my $1,000 program. It'll save your life. Have you seen those? Yeah. Haven't heard the eye color change to Neil. I'm so glad you have missed that one. That's a good one because we want to miss that one. Traditional Jensenian iridologists have often done iris readings cold with no background information from the client. There was a well-known practitioner here in Calgary who shall remain nameless. He has since retired, and a lot of his people have been coming to me. And they tell me things like, you know, you go in and you'd sit down across the little desk from this fellow. He would look in your eyes. If you dared to try to speak, he would shush you. He did not want you to speak. He would tell you what was wrong, AKA diagnose you. And then he'd give you a list of the herbs to pick up out at the front desk. You'd pick them up and come back in 3 weeks, right? He didn't want to have a rapport with you. He just wanted to tell you what to do. Traditional Jensenian iridologists practice that way. And you'll find there's a lot of traditional Jensenians out there still. Modern Jensenian iridologists practice a little bit differently. When Bernard passed away, his daughter-in-law, who had been working with him for many years, was given the business, and she updated all of his research and his charts and everything to reflect much of the constitutional. There's still a little bit of the old school stuff slipped in there, but it's much more the constitutional way, which is so good to hear. Constitutional iridology, this is where we're really going to focus. We're not actually going to touch on the Rayid emotional. That's an entirely different creature. Constitutional iridology, this is where we want to be. Originated with Joseph Deck and others. You now know who they are. It is actually used by medical doctors in Italy, Germany, and Russia. In Germany, you have to be a medical doctor or a naturopath in order to practice iridology. It is that well respected and regarded in Germany. I have a client who comes from a little country that is right next to Russia, and she herself is a medical doctor. She and her husband immigrated here. He's also a medical doctor. He did the boards to practice here. She has not. And she came to me specifically because she said, I don't know where else to go to have iridology done. And so she wanted me to do iridology. She said, the doctors, that's the first thing doctors in Russia do, is they look at your eyes. We gather so much information from this. There are correlative medical studies being done on this. So cool to see. There's a naturopath in Southern California who is doing a bunch of studies. It's just really cool to see the research that's coming out. This teaches us that the eyes are a reflection of the genetic structure of the body. This is really epigenetics is what we're working with when we're working with constitutional iridology. How many of you are at least vaguely familiar with epigenetics? If you are, give me just a epi, because who can spell epigenetics, right? Give me epi, EPI in the chats. Yeah, you're familiar with it. That we all have genes that have other things that they can do. And depending on our diet and our stress levels, we can turn things on and turn things off. And it's not that we want to turn them all on. It's not that we want to turn them all off, because some of those genes do good things, some do bad things. And most genes do more than one thing. So you turn one on, you're going to get some positive and some negative from it, right? This is great. Thank you for letting me know that you are at least a little bit familiar with epigenetics. It's a huge field, and I'm not going to profess to be a professional in epigenes, but iridology does work with epigenetics. And constitutional iridology is the foundation of the course that I have called Dynamic Iridology. Constitutional teaches us that iridology does not give us the answers. It tells us what questions to ask. How many of you use an intake form with your client where they fill out a questionnaire? Do you use that? Yeah. I'm going to ask you to be a little vulnerable here. How long is your questionnaire? How many pages is your questionnaire? 7. Janica goes pages with an exclamation point. Oh, I'm not coming to you, Jana. Maria says 5. My goodness, I have a real thing about questionnaires. I don't know. I want to talk. I want to tell my story. I don't want to put this out. I'm in a different field. 1. Fantastic, Teal. Good for you. Good for you. I'm glad you're here. Okay, so I want to talk. I want to build rapport. I don't think putting my information on paper builds any kind of rapport. And the questionnaires ask so many questions that 90% of them are irrelevant to what I'm doing. So just talk to me, right? So when we use Iridology, we can actually get rid of the questionnaires, or I still have a questionnaire, but my clients don't get it. I don't never give it to them. They fill out their release form. Now they sign off saying they know I'm not a medical doctor and I'm not going to diagnose and I'm not going to prescribe. But I keep the questionnaire to myself. And as we're talking and I'm asking questions, I'll fill in the answers in the places where I need them. And often a half or 2/3 or 3/4 of the questionnaire go unanswered because they're not relevant to what I'm doing right now. When we do constitutional iridology, other iris and sclera changes may continue to be visible with time, revealing areas that may need support. So we're not going to do a cleanse and change your brown eyes to blue. That's not going to happen. But as we get older, we get wrinkles, our hair turns gray, certain things maybe don't work so well. That's the impact of epigenetics. So with our eyes, we may see more pigments become visible in the irides. We might see changes on the whites of the eyes or in the sclera as we get older. Now, some of what's in the sclera is situational and can be modified through diet and lifestyle. Some of what we see on the sclera is epigenetic, and we know which ones are which, and we know which ones we can have an impact on. The ones that are not situational, the ones that are really epigenetic and are creating a long-lasting change, still give us information about the person's chemistry. And so we, from there, know what we need to do with their chemistry to keep this situation from getting worse. We understand why this situation has developed and what we need to do about it. We want background information. We want to have a rapport with our clients. Absolutely critical. You know, I've got clients that have been with me for 45 years now. Would you like to have clients that have been with you for 45 years and come back every few years for several appointments? Yeah. You know why they keep coming back besides the fact that I've answered their, helped them solve problems? They come back because they say, I listen. I could do their appointments probably in 15 to 30 minutes, but they always book and pay for a full hour. They have the option of scheduling a shorter appointment because I know their case really well, but they book the longer appointments because I listen, because we have a rapport. The highest compliment I've ever been paid was by my longest standing client left me a Google review saying she felt like we had become friends and she could talk with me about anything. That to me is rapport. That is the highest compliment anyone can pay me. I want the background information. All right, let's look at some eyes. We're going to get there. We need to know some eye anatomy. We're not going to do the whole eye anatomy. We're going to do what's important here. And what's important is we've got sclera, which is the white of the eye. We've got cornea, and we've got iris. So iris is what we're really going to be looking at tonight. We're not going to do much with cornea or with sclera. There's some things in the cornea that we can look at if they're showing up, but we're not going to go there. We're not going to go into all of the deep science of the anatomy here. You ready to look at some eyes? If you are, give me an oh yeah in the chat box. Let me know you're ready for this. Want to learn some iridology tonight? Here we go. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I love the exclamation points. Those just fuel me. This is so good. Thank you for that. All right. So the first thing to know is that constitutional iridology, unlike other styles, relies very little on mapping. You will see online that people have these really, really insane maps where it's like if this is a 60-minute clock we're looking at, every 1 or 2 minutes is another division showing a different organ or a different function. It's like, oh my goodness, I don't think anyone can be that accurate in an iris assessment. I really don't. And so constitutional looks at the constitution first. We don't slice and dice as our first step. We're not looking at minutia. We're looking at how does this whole system operate. I would imagine that with you primarily being nutritionists, you're looking first at how does the whole system operate, and then you drill down to, and why is it doing that? Where are the weak links? What is the root of this symptom? Correct? Is that pretty close? Or maybe you start narrow and then you build out to understand how the whole system is working. One of those options sound pretty close here. If it does, just give me pretty close in the chat box. Yeah. Number one, fantastic. Love it. So good. We only dissect the person if there's a good reason to. And that alone saves time and increases the efficacy of the iris assessment. You're going to see what I mean as we go along here. This is a quintessential example of a lymphatic iris. So we've got 3 categories. We're looking at lymphatic, biliary, hematogenic. So this is a lymphatic iris. So a lymphatic iris will always have at least some blue. It might not be predominantly blue like this, but it will have some blue. And oh, here's those fibers we were talking about earlier. It will always have some fibers visible. Okay, so it might have a lot of other colors, but if you can see some fibers and some blue, it is lymphatic. The other colors all mean things as well. So common health concerns for our beautiful lymphatic friends are centering around mucous membranes and acid levels and their lymphatic functioning. So when we're working with lymphatic people, the first thing we want to ask is, what would you like my help with? Right? We want to know what their concerns are. And with your training with anatomy and physiology and nutrition, you're able to lump symptoms together and go, oh yeah, that is probably mostly liver related. This is probably mostly intestinal related. This is probably more lymphatic related, right? You can lump symptoms together. We all know the symptoms are just the messenger. They're not the root cause of the problem. So the next question after what would you like my help with is there a personal or family history of anything? I ask that really broad question because I want to know what's going on in the family genes, right? And we know that the genes are also triggered by stress, by nutrition or lack thereof, by exercise or lack thereof, by sleep or lack thereof, right? Our lymphatic people with their predisposition to being too acidic and to being more mucous membrane oriented will usually be more prone to rather problems like asthma, allergies, arthritis, eczema, psoriasis, kidney issues. Right now, you will recognize asthma, allergies, arthritis, eczema, psoriasis as all being strictly related to elevated acids that should be, at least in part, being mitigated by kidney function, right? So when someone comes in, if they've got all of those problems, heaven forbid, we're not giving them something for asthma, something for allergies, something for arthritis. We're actually working on acid balance instead. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Figure out what the root cause is. Yes, Devin says yes. Thank you, Devin. Appreciate that. Does that make sense to everybody else too? Are you good with that? So I'm not looking at tiny details. Thank you, Jan. I appreciate that it's making sense for you too. I'm not looking at tiny details like these little pigments in here. They do mean things, but we're not focusing on that right yet. That will come later on in an assessment. I'm not focusing on fibers that are skittering off like this one. That is important, but it's not critical to the moment. We start with the big picture first, because I can guarantee you there's dietary corrections that need to be done before we do anything else, right? Dietary and lifestyle. Now, that doesn't mean also that if this person has a lung issue that I'm only looking at the lung area of the iris. I am looking for how would that lung issue tie into things that I see. Do I see predispositions of elevated acid here? Again, that's a genetic predisposition. Do I see kidney issues, lymphatic issues, skin issues? You probably know this, that eczema and asthma are best friends. They often happen together in the same person, right? Well, doesn't that seem a little bit weird? What is the link? It's the acid level and the kidneys. Now, that doesn't mean that we might not want to placate the lungs. We might not want to placate the skin, but go to the root. We want to go to the root. So we would look very quickly at each of the areas that we know could have an impact on the acid level for the symptoms that the client is having. So we would look at sclera. There might be things in the sclera that give us information. We would look at the pupil size and shape. And those aren't specific to being lymphatic. Those are add-ons. But that lymphatic tendency, that lymphatic eye, gives us so much information about chemistry. As we work with the client over the months, we can start to slice and dice. As they start getting results, we can go deeper, we can go deeper, we can go deeper. And we can then start working preventively with the client. So this is somebody that I would definitely probably actually start out doing a lot of digestive work with, because you already know this. If they're not digesting their proteins well, they're going to end up with elevated acid in their bloodstream, right? And if they end up with elevated acid in their bloodstream, we're going to see the mucous membranes of the body being irritated, right? And so we've got to go back to the root. And in this person's case, it is likely digestion. They've got 3 different digestive indicators right there. This is another lymphatic eye. You're going, but that doesn't look very blue. It's a steel gray blue. There's many different shades of blue. This is a steel gray blue. Again, we've got lots of fibers and we've got lots of that gray blue in this eye, lots of it. So we know this is lymphatic. Now, do you know anyone who's got lymphatic eyes who has any shade of blue? Do you? I want you to think about them. Yeah, Jenna says me. Okay. So I want you to think about what we're saying about some of these health predispositions. The eyes don't guarantee a problem, right? The eyes suggest predispositions. And what that means is this person may have learned at a very young age that if they had red meat and if they ate too quickly, they would end up with eczema. And so they don't eat red meat anymore. I don't think that's the very best option, but they have started to figure out their rules for health, their own personal rules for health. When they come to us, then we can actually look at that and go, well, if you'd like to eat red meat, there's some important nutrients in red meat. Then how about we introduce a bit of red meat, but we introduce some support to help you digest it better, right? So seeing markers in the eyes doesn't mean they will have a problem. It means they could have a problem if they do all the right things to earn the problem. The flip side is also true. Just because we don't see a marking in the eye doesn't mean they will not have a problem. We all know people, for example, who have brown eyes who have arthritis. That's not one of their primary predispositions, but that person's either done enough out of balance with their chemistry or emotionally that they have allowed arthritis to set up. Does that make sense? That the eyes are not a guarantee, they are a direction. Let me know if that makes sense. It does. Marie says, yeah. Maria, thank you very much. Thank you for that. Yeah. And Tennille says it makes sense. Excellent. Devin says, yes. If the eyes were a guarantee, we would be able to diagnose from the eyes. The eyes only give us suggestions of predispositions. So when we see someone like this again, we need to remember that people who are lymphatic also are more predisposed to thyroid issues. Now, why would that be? It's going to go back to the way acid imbalances mess with our mineral balances, and our mineral balances can unsettle the endocrine system, most particularly the thyroid and the parathyroid, right? And this is another reason why we need to ask about personal history, about family history. It's another reason why I love to have my clients bring in lab tests if they've got them, right? We know that thyroid imbalance, thyroid parathyroid imbalance can lead to calcium assimilation issues, and that can lead to bone issues, right? So we need to be following these lines of questioning as appropriate. I wouldn't ask every question of a client in a first appointment. I would focus questions on things that were relevant to my client's immediate needs, get them making some progress there that will earn their trust, and then we'll be able to work deeper as we continue to work together, right? With iridology, we never want to overwhelm our client with too much information because there's a lot of information in these eyes. So our goal here isn't to use iridology like some kind of a crystal ball. This is not a party game of guess what's wrong with me. The old Jensenian style of iridology really led to the guess what's wrong with me game because they didn't care about creating rapport and they were so diagnostic. And I was one of them. I started out there decades ago. With constitutional, again, it's about understanding the constitution of the person so we can understand where they are less resilient, where they are more resilient. How will that impact their health? Then how does their diet and their lifestyle and their stress level impact them so that we can then begin to ask the right questions and make the best suggestions. The goal here is really remediation that leads to better health, right? It's giving them information that empowers them to enjoy better health. So important. Okay, so that is the tip of the iceberg on the blue eyes or the lymphatic eyes. So what are you thinking here? What questions do you have for me about that so far? When you see blue eyes, now you know to be thinking about anything in the body that could suggest that acid imbalance. That's your blue. I really have trouble seeing the blue. So you have trouble seeing the blue in this eye, Devin, I think is what you're saying, correct? So you need to think of blue as a range of colors, right? A range of shades and hues. So not all blue eyes are this blue. When we start looking at other eye colors in the next few slides, you'll see that there's quite a contrast here. And that's where we need to be focused. I guess, what fibers are we looking at? At this stage, when we're looking at primary constitution, we're not even looking at fibers. When we've done that primary constitution, we may look specifically at fibers, and we would, again, we can look at them collectively as a constitutional subtype, and that can give us information. Or we can look at them individually based on an iridology map. For example, here we have less fiber density. And we know that because this is very shaded, it's very dark compared to the rest of the iris. When we have a low fiber density, so not as many threads per square inch, we know that that organ, the organ that correlates to this area of the eye, is less resilient. In this case, it is the kidney. Specifically, the right kidney is less resilient. Now, if we had the left eye, we would probably see a very similar pattern on the left eye, and we would know that this person's kidneys tend to be left resilient. And Tennille, this is a great question. Don't all eyes have fibers? Yes, they do. But as we look at the next slide, you're going to see why it's important to ascertain whether you can see the fibers or not. Okay, that's a great question, Tennille. So hopefully, Devin, that helped you a little bit. Look at this eye. This is a true brown eye, also known as hematogenic. So Devin, can you see that here what we've got is we've got so much pigment sitting, I'm going to pop back a few images here, sitting in the on the very surface of the iris that we can't actually see the fibers. In a blue eye, we have much less pigment, and so we can see the fibers. It's like a glaze of pigment on top of those fibers. So when we see no blue in the iris and no fibers, we have a hematogenic eye. Tennille, makes sense? I love that. Oh, I see it now. I love the enthusiasm. Yeah, see that? See that? So this means there's the contrast. You can see where you see fibers and where you don't, where you see blue and where you don't, by the contrast, right? So when we've got someone who's got hematogenic eyes, we know that their weak links their inherent potential risks tend to be more blood and liver based. That doesn't mean they're going to have a problem with their blood. It doesn't mean they're going to have a problem with their liver. It just means if you compare it to a blue-eyed person, the blue-eyed person is less likely to have liver problems. The brown-eyed person is less likely to have acid problems. But the brown-eyed person is more likely to have blood issues or liver issues. Your blue-eyed person is more likely to have acid balancing issues. Making sense? I want you to think about people you know who have brown eyes, like really brown eyes, like dark brown eyes. And think about what you know about their health, and think about what you know about blood and liver. Liver is a really big topic. It does over 500 different jobs. You know, everyone says, well, it filters the blood, and it does that. But that's like 1 out of 500 jobs, right? And so this is where your anatomy comes into play. Your anatomy and physiology is you understand at least a handful more of the liver's functions and how those functions, if they're not working quite right, could create symptoms, right? Liver's responsible for storing iron. It's responsible for making cholesterol from carbohydrates and shooting that cholesterol out to be used as hormones, and then bringing that back to break down the cholesterol and to break down the hormones, right? And it creates proteins, and it creates, oh my goodness, so many things. And it stores fat, soluble vitamins, and so busy that when we say blood and liver, liver is a huge, huge question mark, right? So again, we're going to ask, what would you like my help with? And then we're going to take that nutrition, anatomy, and physiology training we've got. We're going to say, how are these symptoms linked? How could they be connected? What is the common organ for these symptoms, right? And then we're going to look into the eyes to see, is there something in these eyes? Is there a color pattern? Is there a marking? Is there a patch of pigment? That gives me more information and helps me to understand why the client has these problems, right? How are you feeling with this? What questions do you have? While you're typing that in, this actually goes back to answer to Neil's question. She said, don't all eyes have fibers? And the answer is absolutely yes. I want you to look right in here. And you see these little bits of white. You can actually see a little bit of fiber in here as well, inside here. This is what's called a lacuna. This is also a lacuna. It is where the top layer of fiber is separated and has a gap in it. And what we're looking at here, what we're looking at on the pigment is pigment that is sitting on top of the top layer of fiber. What we're looking at here is fiber that is down a layer where the pigment didn't reach. What we're looking at here is fiber that is down a layer where the fiber or where the pigment didn't reach. Tennille, does that help you to see that there's fibers in all eyes? Now, you won't actually see this in most brown eyes. Seeing this kind of an eye that has all of these variations in the fiber structure on the surface is very unusual. It still is hematogenic. We see no other colors in this eye. This actually doesn't count as a color in here because it's down a layer. So we're not seeing other colors except for brown and gold. Brown and gold are the characteristic colors of hematogenic. All right. Hematogenic people are inherently more prone to, and I want you to see how you can connect this to blood and liver, spleen issues, stomach and digestion issues, circulation and heart, varicose veins. People with brown eyes tend to have more of an alkaline leaning with their pH, and that's a problem. Just as too much acid in our lymphatic people eats up minerals really quickly, not enough acid in our hematogenic people means they are unable to assimilate minerals well. So they will often have, our hematogenic people will often have endocrine imbalances because they can't assimilate minerals fast enough. Make sense? So it's going to make absolutely no difference to pour a truckload full of minerals into them. if you're not helping them to be a little bit more acidic. So depending on what symptoms or imbalances your client wants help with, again, questions for your hematogenic person would, of course, include, what do you want my help with? Is there anything running in the family? And beyond that, you'd want to ask potentially, and pick and choose. I wouldn't ask all of these of every brown-eyed client, but you'd potentially want to ask things like, is there a family history of blood imbalances of any sort? What about allergies? Because that ties back to liver imbalances, right? What about immune issues? Because that ties back to liver as well. Your liver is 10% of its mass is dedicated to immune function, right? What about hormonal issues? We mentioned that one earlier. What about your blood lipids? What about weight issues? Liver plays huge roles with weight, right? Those can all be due to liver imbalances. So you wouldn't, again, ask all of those questions. You would pick and choose the ones that were appropriate, right? This is where iridology guides you to ask that, and the client's symptoms guide you to ask the questions that need to be asked, rather than giving your client a questionnaire that I guarantee 95% of your clients don't want to fill out. I've never had a client complain about not having to fill out a form, right? They're happy to fill out name, address, phone number, and give me a signature, but I've never had anyone say, oh, darn, I was so hoping you'd give me a 5-page questionnaire. Not a one, right? They want the conversation too, because that's what they don't get anywhere else. So what about all of these other things that we see in an eye like this? That's what we talk about. Well, all of this and more in the dynamic iridology course, right? That there's a lot of information in that eye. The biliary eye. Okay, how are we doing? Did the brown eye fit close to anybody you know? Anyone you know who's got brown eyes? Maria says, yes, me. There you go, Maria. There's some insider. Janice says her husband. Yes. Excellent. Excellent. Isn't it great to get these little bits of insight? That little bit of understanding just by looking at their eyes. Fantastic. So this is a biliary eye. Now, when you see the word bili, what do you think of? What does bili make you think of? Liver. Yeah. Hepatic. Yeah. Excellent. I like that you've got your A and P down. So good. This is the kind of an eye that some of the old iridologists, or the ones who are working with the Jensenian or the Robert Morse kind of stuff, would say, oh, you need a cleanse. You've got so much toxin in your eye. You know, we've got fibers in there. That means you're supposed to have blue eyes, and your eyes aren't blue. You're just full of it. You know, we need to clean you out. Right? And that is not true. What we know about biliary eyes is they are usually found in people who have a lymphatic-eyed parent and a hematogenic-eyed parent or grandparent. So you might have to go back a generation or two to find the one of one and one of the other, but this is genetic. This is not toxicity. This is the eye type that trips most iridologists up, because there can be so little fiber visible. This has quite a bit of fiber, but there can be so little fiber visible that people might think it's a hematogenic eye. Now, you know, if you called it hematogenic and worked with it in that way, it's not the end of the world. You're still going to do an awful lot of good for this person. But you might be puzzled because they might have some acidic tendencies as well. And you're going to have to, you know, kind of think, oh, why is that? We overcome that problem by eventually getting proper iridology cameras so that we can pop these photos up on our computer screens and see them really big and see details. So with the biliary eye, we're going to look at a continuum here. Why the circles around the outside? So these, yes, this is someone who internalizes their stress, Jana. And that gives us all kinds of information about their chemistry and their personality. That's why those are there. They're not going away. Those are inherited. Those are, this person's got them for good. When we look at our continuum, great question, by the way, we had our lymphatic, which was blue and fibers, right? We had our hematogenic, which was no blue and no fibers. So in the middle, what we've got is biliary, and that is no blue, yes fibers. So when we look at this eye, we're not going to find any blue in the iris, but we've got fibers. That's what we need to see to call this biliary. Now, often with our biliary, we'll see browns and golds and oranges. We will see that these wrinkles will often be golden, slightly golden. They might even have a bit of greenish colors in these wrinkles. There will often be a darker area closer to the pupil, just like we've got here. We've got this darker band, right? So I want you to think, do you know anybody who's got biliary eyes? You might call them hazel. Your daughter, Jana. Cool. Devin's husband. Right on. Excellent. Okay. Tennille's mom. Excellent. Okay. Good, good, good. So let's talk about what these people have for health concerns. So again, we always ask first, what would you like my help with? Right? We want to know the context of, we want that frame around what we're looking at, especially for the first appointment or two, because that's going to help us narrow down what we're looking at and what we're looking for to get our clients results more quickly, which will make them happy and it will start them on that path to better health. It will also earn trust and it will build rapport, right? I've seen studies that say that medical doctors have decided within 17 seconds of entering the exam room what they're going to do for you, right? Because they're typically, nowadays, it used to be they'd bring in the paper file, but now they bring in their laptop and they're looking at the notes that were made coming in for a sore throat, right? They don't dig very deep. Oh yeah, that's probably strep. Have a look, it's red. Yep, we'll give you an antibiotic. Well, you don't know that it's strep, right? But they're giving an antibiotic. We don't do that with iridology. We take our time. So biliary, they will typically personally or family history wise have digestion issues, particularly stomach issues, stomach as an organ. They've got the hematogenic genetics in there as well, which means that we're going to see probably some liver imbalances or predisposition towards liver imbalances. Might be problems digesting fat with bile production. Maybe they've had gallstones and they've had their gallbladder out. We might see blood sugar issues because liver and pancreas work together on that one. We might see immune function issues. We might see allergies, anything that the liver can do or decide to not do, that could be an issue here. Gallbladder is really common in biliary people. And again, often with biliary people, it's a stronger leaning towards gallstones because they've got that real predisposition towards liver imbalance, but they've got that acid problem from the lymphatic, and that can lead to gallstones. Pancreas can be an issue here, so blood sugars. So we need to think about their blood sugars. We need to think about how well they digest carbohydrates, right? Since the pancreas shoots enzymes into the small intestine via the common bile duct, specifically to finish carbohydrate digestion, right? So we need to be thinking about those kinds of things for our biliary people as well. So what I want to know from you right now is, what's been your biggest aha moment? What's the thing that you learned today that you went, oh my stars, I did not know that. That is so cool. I'm going to give you a minute to put that in. I love seeing ahas. Devin says the rings. Yeah, cool, cool. The biliary type being the combo. Yeah. So Jana, had you heard before that the biliary type was the toxic type that needed cleansing? No? Okay, great. Tennille says different colored eyes show us different ailments. Yeah, possible ailments. Yeah, so cool. The difference in eye color and what they mean. Can you see how this could be such a boost to your nutrition practice when you're working with clients? Jana says, my family is all so different. Yeah, yeah. And now you have little categories that you can loosely put them into to understand them better. Where do green and gray fall? Green and gray both fall into blue. They both fall into lymphatic, Devin. Good question. Think back to kindergarten. What colors did you mix to get green? And I literally want you to answer that one for me, Devin. What colors did you mix to get green? I know it's an easy question. Yellow and blue. Absolutely. So we've got that blue lymphatic eye with a yellow pigment over top, and that yellow pigment gives us more information. The gray is a very washed out blue, right? So that's where they fall. Good question. All right. So if you're ready to take that leap and learn a little bit more about how to learn iridology, we're going to talk about a few extra things here. When we do iridology, yes, we look at the eye color just the way we have, and that helps us to narrow things down a little bit. We also look at things like shading. Are there areas of the eye that are darker than others? And we saw that with the eye that had the kidney, the shading in the kidney zone. We look for how deep, the shading means that we're looking deeper into the eye. So how deep does it look? We look at fibers that look like they're sitting up high, protruding from the surface of the eye. We look at rings like this that tell us the person internalizes their stress. We look at things like this that teach us about liver function and how liver is managing carbohydrates. Right? These are all things that we can see very quickly. And, if I saw this in someone who's 22, I'd be reading them the Riot Act and I'd be wanting them to get to their medical doctor right now for all kinds of labs. If I see this in someone who's 95, I'm probably not going to be as concerned. This is something that develops over time, but we have specific understandings of what the chemistry is for it. So I started learning iridology in 1979. Okay, do the math. I can't, it's too high. Constitutional iridology had not yet come to Canada, and it was not widespread in the US. We've looked at, Harry and Bill Cardona and seen that they were just starting up in the early 1980s. So I studied and embraced the work of Bernard Jensen, and I followed him religiously for about 5 years. And by the end of 5 years, I was frustrated. I had been taught that every one of these lacunae, as we call them, lesions as Bernard called them, was a pathological problem that was happening right now. And that if we did the right kinds of diet, the right kinds of herbs, if we did all the right things, these would get smaller and they would eventually disappear. I never, ever saw that. All of the cleanses, all of the really, really rigorous programs we did with clients, I never saw those things go away, but I did see their health improve dramatically, right? That was the exciting part, but it was also the frustrating part because I began to not trust iridology. I was absolutely within a heartbeat away of going, this is quackery, it's garbage, I'm leaving, I'm just going to do nutrition and herbs because this doesn't work. And it was right then, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, right? Right then is when I learned about this thing called constitutional iridology. And that was where I learned that these are inherited. They suggest an increased risk in those areas individually, but they collectively give us an overview of some general chemistry issues that want to happen in this person. And specifically with this person, it would be endocrine issues, that they're more prone to endocrine imbalances. Now that is, and Jenna, I love what you say. So beautiful though. It is beautiful. Eyes are amazing. With Jensen, I was taught pathology. Oh, problem. With constitutional, I was taught work of art, which was such a lovely shift in the thinking, right? We know these aren't going to change, but we know we can still improve this person's health. We might need to work on blood sugar balance. We might need to work on the reproductive hormones. We might need to work on adrenal glands or the thyroid or whatever, based on where we see these and what her symptoms are. Not going to change the eyes, but we can change the health. We can teach the client what they need to know about lifestyle and diet to improve their health. And that takes many appointments. We don't do a complete whitewash of their diet in one go because it's too overwhelming. So we pick the things that will have the biggest impact first, get them to change those. And then we can be fine-tuning, fine-tuning, fine-tuning. And then they're in a place where they're feeling great and they disappear for a few years. Then they get older and things happen. Maybe they forget what we talked about and they're back to old habits. They're going to come back, and they do come back because you did such a good job with them the first time. They want to know, what do I do now that I'm 5 years older, 10 years older, now that I'm perimenopausal, now that I'm postmenopausal? What do I need to do now? And the same eyes will give us different information because we now have a different frame in which to look through, which to see these eyes. Here's a case study for you. This is one of my clients. She came to me, she was in her early 30s. We're going to look at a couple of different sets of her eye photos as well to show you how lighting makes the difference here. And this is really important. She came to me wanting to have a baby. She and her husband had been trying for a year and they'd had no luck. Her husband's semen analysis was beautiful. He was on track. She was having a period every 28 days. And I want you to see if this actually makes sense to you. When she described her menstrual flow, she said it's a smear on the toilet paper. I never need to use even a panty liner. Now, does that sound like a healthy endometrium? Does that sound like an endometrium that could actually harbor a fertilized egg? What do you think? No. Devin, I agree. I agree. She was ovulating, and the doctors all said her hormones were fine, but she had no endometrium somehow. And they'd done an ultrasound and said, oh, your endometrium is thick enough, but she wasn't shedding it then. So we had a problem here that the doctors hadn't picked up on. So I looked at her eyes and she had almost no ovulatory mucus. So we knew her hormones were not great, right? There's a lot of red flags here. As I was looking at her eyes in her very first appointment, I noticed this. Do you see this little tiny orangey rusty colored pigment right there? Let me know if you can see that. If you're on a phone, you probably won't see it because your screen is too small. Many of you can see it. Yeah. Okay. Research in the past 5 or 6, no, maybe 7 years now suggests that this type of a pigment has a very strong correlation to the MTHFR defect. Do you know what MTHFR is? I'm hoping you do. Jenna says, cool. Devin says, yes. Yeah, right? So cool. So here I am working with this woman. She doesn't know, and I wouldn't say, do you have MTHFR? Because she internalizes her stress. We've got those rings coming around her eyes, and she's already a nervous Nelly, right? She's anxious about every little thing. So I'm not going to say, do you have MTHFR? Because if I tell her what it is, she's going to flip, right? So I'm just thinking, okay, what do we do for MTHFR? We do liver support and we add methylated B vitamins. Well, it just so happens the prenatal vitamin that I like to use has the methylated Bs, right? Yeah, Jenny, yeah, methylated Bs, absolutely, absolutely. So we worked together. We got her to where she actually needed sanitary protection. We were so excited. She called me one day and went, I'm just lucky I wasn't wearing white pants. Yes, yes, you know, we celebrate weird things here, right? Exactly, Janet, right? So excited because now we knew there was an endometrium forming, that she had enough to shed. Her body was willing to let it go. This was great. Well, she got pregnant about 6 months after we started working together. So we were still working, and she got pregnant. And about 4 months into the pregnancy, she did 23andMe. Now, remember, she is anxious. She works in HR, which is really hard. There's a lot of anxiety in HR with hiring and firing and working with employees that have issues, right? So she sends me this email after she gets her 23andMe report back. And I swear my computer nearly exploded. There was so much anxiety in her message. Oh my goodness, I just got my 23andMe back. I have the MTHFR. Oh my goodness, is my baby going to be okay? Have I hurt my, oh my goodness, I should never have gotten pregnant. You know, just on and on. I went, whoa, whoa. Well, I want you just to stop, take a deep breath. So I'm doing this in an email with her and saying, stop, just take a deep breath. I've got your back. I said, can you hop on a Zoom with me right now? And she said, yeah. So she ditched out of work for a few minutes and she got on Zoom with me. I pulled up her eye photos and I said, do you see this? Very first appointment, I suspected you might have MTHFR. Now, I can't diagnose that. I'm not a doctor, but I suspected, and I knew the most harmless thing to do, even if you didn't have MTHFR, and the most beneficial thing to do was to give you methylated B vitamins and to support your liver. So, you know those prenatal vitamins we're using? Yep. They've got your methylated Bs. Don't worry about a thing. We've done everything we can. And, you know, you've had an ultrasound already. Things are looking good. The placenta had a marginal implantation of the umbilical cord, but it was fine. It didn't create a problem. And you know, she had another ultrasound closer to due date. Everything was fine. So she was fine. Now, these lacunae also suggest for her that she is prone to non-specific hormone imbalances, endocrine imbalances. The most common things we would assume here would probably be things like blood sugars, adrenals, thyroid. All right, those would be our most common things, and we'd want to see some labs on that to see what was going on. Now let's look at other photos of her eyes done with different lighting. So here we've got frontal lighting. We've got light coming straight on from the front. Notice we can sort of see the wrinkles in the eyeballs. When we turn this down and we only have one light in each eye and it's coming, that means it's coming from the side. Do you see how much more clearly we see the wrinkles? They're really deep in here, really deep. And so with that, that's another reason why I wanted her on methylated Bs. Does this particular MTHFR show only in one eye? It only needs to show in one eye. It only needs to show in one eye. Right? We don't need to see it in both eyes. If it's there once, it's there, right? And that doesn't mean she has MTHFR. It means she has a risk. Now, the study that's being done in Southern California says it's a 95% correlation, which is pretty darn good. Which, of course, if you studied MTHFR, you know that it affects a minimum of 50% of pure blood North Americans and 75% of Asians, right? So it's prevalent. That you can't even get a test for MTHFR here in Alberta anymore unless you go to a private lab and pay out of pocket, because it's so prevalent, it's so common, right? But doctors don't tell their pregnant women or the women who want to get pregnant that they should take a methylated B. Why would they? They don't know that yet. They're not using that information, right? So you will find that even looking at, if you look at other iridologists who are teaching, they will not teach you this kind of depth, right? They're not going to teach you the clinical application. They're going to teach you the names of markers. They're going to teach you how to correlate this to an iris map, but they're not going to teach you how markers connect and what the integrations are. You already know that if someone has MTHFR, they are prone to anxiety and depression, right? So we need those B vitamins in the right form for them. Making sense? Are we there? Again, in my early iridology training, this uneven pigment meant they were toxic. They needed to cleanse, and we were, by gum, we were going to cleanse them till those eyes went blue. Yeah, that's not true. Absolutely not true, right? We've talked about where this kind of an eye color comes from. People who, teachers who taught me and books that I studied back then often had really convincing before and after pictures. The lesions did look smaller, sort of. The eyes did look bluer, sort of, but I didn't know anything about photographic technology back then. What we know now is that your camera makes all the difference in the world. Your lighting source makes all the difference. Back when I started, we were shooting print film. The brand of your camera, the brand of your film, and the brand of the paper that the developer used all changed the output. They all altered color, which meant that if people had before and after photos, you had to know, was it the same camera? Was it the same brand of film? Was it the same paper? And did they use the same shutter speed, the same ISO, the same focal f-stop? Because all of those things change the output, right? You know from nutrition that when you're doing a study, you only change one variable, right? But back then with print film, we were changing 3 or 4. Barbara, fantastic. So Barbara, I'm going to make a note and I will send you a link to do that later on. Fantastic. So what we've got here then is in the before and after pictures that were being used to teach iridology, they were changing different aspects. Sometimes they were even using color filters to change the output. And so we know that that is absolutely cheating, and we really don't want to do that, right? So, you know, my frustration was growing. I was ready to walk away, and I've told you that before, because the eyes weren't changing. And I really wanted to do iridology. I loved iridology, even the Jensenian stuff, but it wasn't working. And I'm not going to put my reputation on something that doesn't work, right? And so with an eye like this, right, we've got, this is a biliary eye. We've got no blue, but we do have fibers. We've got the darker colors toward the center. So we know we're going to be looking at liver. We've got the browns in there for liver. We've got that focused in the digestive area. We've got yellows, which are going to teach us kidneys want to be struggling or they want to create problems, right? We can look at different markings like these little things radiating out, these little patches of pigment, these rings coming around, even that milky film at the edge of the eye. These all give us so much information. This is a client of mine. This is one of my clients who's been with me since the very beginning. We were having babies together. That when she came in a year or two ago, I asked her, you know, when did we meet? And what baby were you having? And what baby was I having? And that's how we figured out it had been 45 years. Just absolutely brilliant. She and I, you know, they come in, they come and they go, and they fade in and out, and that's just fine. When this client was coming back to me this second time, she wanted to lose some weight. She'd gained some weight. She was in her late 60s, wanted to lose some weight, but her blood pressure was up. Her cholesterol was up. Her hemoglobin A1C was up. Her triglycerides were up. She was really not doing very well. She knows herbs. She knows nutrition. A lot of stress in her family, and she'd been unable to focus on her own health. Now, these eyes do not show toxicity. They are actually biliary irides, right? We've got fiber showing and we've got no blue, so she's biliary. But we've got a lot of things in here that say liver wants to make things difficult, from the white film at the edge of the eye to the individual pigments. These things tell us that the liver wants to impact different things. And these are things, we're not going to take the white film out. We're not going to erase these pigments. They're going to stay there because this is partially genetic and somewhat influenced by lifestyle. These are genetic. So it's showing us where the body wants to have problems with. Now, we started working with her. Again, reaffirmed things that I know she knew, but she just needed someone to love her into doing them again. Cleaned up her diet tremendously, supported her digestion, and literally within 3 months, she lost 20 pounds without doing hardcore dieting. She was just cleaning things up. And she went to the doctor, and the doctor said all her numbers were correcting. Her blood pressure was down. Her hemoglobin A1C was down. Her lipids were her triglycerides, they were all where they should be. Yeah, Devin, she just needed to be loved, right? She needed to be reminded that she's worth it. I often find that women are like the totem pole in the family, but they're not the top of the totem pole where they get all the sunshine. They're the bottom that's buried in the earth and they don't get the good stuff, right? And so she just needed to be loved. And that's what I did. So we did lower carbs in her diet. We did higher protein. We did good fat choices, stuff that you all teach, right? Pretty much clean up the diet, right? We got her walking for 30 minutes a day. We used some omega-3. We used some berberine with her to help with the insulin resistance. We worked on her gut biome. We used some betaine hydrochloric acid for digesting protein and some broad enzymes for carbs and fats. And we specifically got her to add protein to her breakfast. It was so, so lovely. Now, about a year later, I was heartbroken. There was some family stress and significant stress. And just a few months after that, she had a heart attack. I believe that heart attacks are not from high cholesterol. I believe they are from specific types of emotional stresses. So she had a heart attack. Bless her husband. He was retired, but he worked in health and safety kinds of things. They lived 3 minutes away from a major hospital. He recognized that it was probably a heart attack. And rather than calling for an ambulance, which would have taken 30 minutes to get to them, even though they're 3 minutes away, he put her in the car and took her straight in and got her medical attention right away. And so now she's on 9 different medications and has been for about 3 years now. The family stress is still not resolved. She's finding it really hard to get back on track. Her weight has crept up again. And so we're really working from ground level again, from ground zero, with getting her to make those little dietary changes again. She's very nervous about introducing supplements alongside her medications, and I don't blame her. The doctors have put the fear of God into her for these drugs. You know, you'll be on these forever, and if you come off them, you're going to die, right? And so, fine, we'll work around the drugs. Let's work with your diet. Let's work with your lifestyle. Let's work with your emotions. Let's work with your mental health. Let's prioritize you. You know, you've been it for everybody in your family for nearly 70 years now, and no one has loved you back. Let me love you. Let me help you get your health back on track. She's far too precious to let her go like that, right? Again, in original training I had, every one of these leaf-shaped, petal-shaped things was a pathological problem waiting to happen. You know, when I learned constitutional iridology for the first time, it's pretty funny. I had been teaching at a health fair way up in Grand Prairie. I was the keynote speaker, and then I presented a workshop the next day. And in between workshops, my workshops, there was another teacher who was teaching, and he was teaching constitutional iridology. And I looked at the things he was showing on the overhead projector, and it was like, wow, that's cool. I want that. I wrote down names that were on the different documents he was showing, and I came back to my office. I used to write for a herb journal that came out of the US. And on the very back page of that herb journal was an article written by Bill Cardona, who I didn't know yet, talking about this thing, constitutional iridology, that I just heard about in Grand Prairie, right? And it's like, okay, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. I wrote down to the number to Bill Cardona or to his address and said, because we didn't have email back then, and long distance was very expensive back then. Oh, how am I dating myself? I wrote down to them and I said, what information do you have? I want to buy some training. They had 3 VHS videotapes, a total of 6 hours. Count them, 6. I bought all 3 of them. I probably turned those 6 hours of training into like 60 hours of training for how often I watched them and played them and paused them and made notes and added to my notes. And that was the start of it. And then I connected with Bill and brought him up to teach certification classes a couple of times. And that led to me eventually becoming a certified instructor as well. When we see pigments like this, again, you will see the Jensenians and the Robert Morses saying that this means that you have specific toxicity. No, you don't. You've got a specific organ that genetically is out of balance, and it wants to create stress either for itself or for another organ. That's what this means. So we have to understand what is the color and what is the placement. When we understand both of those things, we then understand what are we likely to see for symptoms, and are there any other markings in this area that will add to the story, that will help us to understand even more, like this fiber that's running across other fibers, that adds to the story. The fact that there's yellow here adds to the story. This all gives us more information about what kinds of things want to go wrong here, want to be out of balance. They may or may not be out of balance. We don't know that until we talk to the client. And then we can ascertain what is our best approach for helping the client to regain their health, bring this back into balance, right? So important. Old iridology would say that this person has a lot of parasites. Yeah, you got to do a parasite cleanse. That this person is headed for a nervous breakdown. Neither of those are true. Neither of them. Constitutional iridology teaches us to look at this in the context of the owner. Now, everything I see on a quick glance here says this person is very prone, again, to internalizing her stress into having maybe some repercussions from holding on to too much stress. There's a lot more information here. This is a woman who was in her mid-30s. She, an Asian woman, she and her husband had been trying for 3 years to get pregnant. Yes, I do a lot of fertility and pregnancy work. And so when I see these rings, they tell me, again, she internalizes her stress. When I see this little teeny tiny brown pigment here, I'm thinking MTHFR, right? And so again, we did the methylated prenatal vitamin with her, as well as a lot of other things. We've got a milky film around the edge, which tells me her lipid profile is probably out of balance. Her labs proved that. And so I had to ask her then when she came in, first off, I asked her, how often were her cycles? Well, they're 90 days. Well, that's an infertile cycle. It doesn't matter what you do to it. It's an infertile cycle. Never get pregnant on that one. And so then and that's the dead giveaway, PCOS, right? So I asked her, had the doctors ever used a term like PCOS? Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, PCOS and type 2 diabetes are like this. So have they ever suggested you might have type 2 diabetes? Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm on metformin. Okay, great. That would have been nice to lead with, but thank you. We got there. So we did all of the things. We charted BBT for forever with her. We got her cycles down to 35 days. She followed a diet that was so strict. And as we were talking about diet, she was so overwhelmed with the diet because it needed to happen rapidly. Her sweet husband came to every appointment with her and said to her, when we talked about diet, don't worry, sweetie, I will take over food prep. I just want you to eat what I make. And she relaxed. So we did massive dietary changes that were good for both of them. Jen, it's so good that you made it. We'll talk to you again later. And we got her on that. We did a whole bunch of supplements. We got her cycle down to 35 days, as I mentioned. And we worked for 18 months. And she wasn't pregnant. And I spent the night before they came in for their appointment, spent it laying awake in bed. How do I tell them I've done everything I can? How do I tell them I don't? And we did everything. We imported herbs. We did everything. How do I tell them that I have nothing left to offer except love and support? And they came in for their appointment. They said, we need to talk to you. And I'm thinking, oh, great. They're going to fire me now. I'm toast. I'm gone. And they said, we did a pregnancy test this morning and it's positive. Yeah, there were happy tears then. There's still happy tears now. Yes, never make a good doctor. I do get emotionally involved. And so we took her through the entire pregnancy. She'd been told she would absolutely develop gestational diabetes. She did not. She had a beautiful baby in a 4-hour, count it 4 from start to finish, labor and delivery. The doctors could not believe it. And we kept working for another 3 months after that to make sure breastfeeding was established, that she was sticking with her eating because we didn't want her slipping into bad patterns just because the baby was here, because we don't want her developing T2D that has so many other health risks, right? You know those. And so again, I would not have known to think MTHFR if I had not seen this, and I would not have thought to be working with her nervous system as much as we did to balance her hormones if I hadn't seen her eyes. Devin, so subtle. Yeah, so subtle, right? So subtle. This is our last case. A male, yeah, a man. I actually do work with men too. 5 feet 11, 175 pounds, 64 years old. He was coming to see me about 6 years before we took these photos. We had done a lot of work. He was in his mid 50s back then, done a lot of, we had talked about a lot of work. He didn't do much of it, right? So now he was 64. And now his hemoglobin A1C is 7.2. His GFR is 61, which is flirting with chronic kidney disease. His potassium is a little bit low. He's pre-diabetic. His sugars are 6.8 to 7.5, depending on the day. He's tried metformin, but that gave him diarrhea. So they switched him to Glumetza and Giardians. He's on hydrochlorothiazide for his blood pressure. He's on Trandolapril for his cholesterol. He's on sildenafil, which is Viagra, for the side effects of the blood pressure medication. And he's on Mylan torvastatin for his cholesterol as well. So he's got all these drugs, right? And I noticed that he's clearing his throat a lot. When people are clearing their throat a lot, that to me is acid reflux, right? So I know he doesn't have enough stomach acid, not too much. We say acid reflux, but it's not really acid. It's stuff from the stomach back, washing up the esophagus, irritating the esophagus, leading to mucus. And it's 99% of the time it's from too little stomach acid, right? Breakfast was a cinnamon bun or a muffin or Cheerios. Have you looked at the ingredients on Cheerios lately? Yeah, I wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole. Lunch was a sandwich, white bread, lunch meat or tuna or egg salad. Okay, I can handle tuna or egg salad, I suppose. Supper, his wife is a flight attendant, so she's gone for 4 days at a time. When she's gone, he orders in pizza or he gets fast food. When she's home, they actually eat real food, but it's usually potatoes and pasta and meat. He does drink 3 liters of water a day, so that's good. So he's beginning to show us indications that his liver doesn't want to balance his lipids, which we know because his cholesterol is elevated, but it's here in his eyes too. This is all telling us that he doesn't digest well, never has, never will by himself. We need to make sure he's got the right digestive support if he is going to break down his proteins, particularly. We've got this ring is way too far away from this ring. This tells us that he is prone probably to constipation, very large bowel movements. And what he described is what I call carbohydrate farts. Passing gas that has an odor, but it's not putrid. It's just bad, right? And he's got the wrinkles in his eyes. So he internalizes his stress as well. We changed his diet a lot. We got him doing protein and veggies for breakfast. We got him to snack on an apple with clean nut butter, preferably a tart apple. Lunch became a large salad with some kind of chicken or beef or fish on the side. Supper was protein and vegetables, and it could be a stew or a stir fry or roasted. We also talked a lot about portion control. He needed to chew his food. We needed to start getting his blood pressure down pretty quick. So we started him on some L-arginine just as a Band-Aid while we were getting to the root of the problem. We also needed to get his blood sugars under control. So we did some berberine with him, got him to walk 2 times a day for 30 minutes each time, which was easy to do because he's a security guard. He's actually supervises most of the guards. That was his first appointment. His next appointment, we added some hydrochloric acid and a broad digestive enzyme as well. After about 6 months, we got his blood pressure down to 118/74. His blood sugars were down to 5.9, so his hemoglobin A1C down to 5.9, and it had started at 7 something. It was 7.2. So huge progress in just a few months. His hemoglobin A1C was down to 5.9. His blood sugars were also down to that 6.0 range, which down from 6.8 and 7.5. That's huge, huge. So in that next appointment, we started getting him doing some resistance training, get some more muscle work going on. And then 6 months later, his doctor said you can quit the Jardiance and the Glumetza. And just a few months ago, his doctor also took away the cholesterol medications and the blood pressure medications. So as we get rid of those, then we're going to see he doesn't need the Viagra, right? That's going to come around. So again, we've got digestion showing here. We've got the risk of constipation showing here. You can't see it very well in these photos, but there was a slight yellowing of his sclera, which would be liver. We've got the wrinkles or the rings in his eyes, which is internalizing stress. In his right eye this is his right eye, at about 25 minutes right here, you can almost not see it. There's a teeny tiny pigment, which suggests MTHFR. There's another teeny tiny one right here, right? This is where being able to blow it up helps. So that did make me think, okay, we need to go with a vitamin that has methylated Bs in it. Again, looking at liver and triglycerides and the predisposition towards his blood sugar issues. So again, we've got everything coming down to the point where the doctor's saying, we're going to take the drugs away, test you out, see how you hold. And if we need to, we'll go back to drugs, but we're hoping we don't need to. All right. Cool, right? Cool. So much information in there that correlates with symptoms and helps us to understand symptoms. Now, with all of that, yes, here's information about the course. How are you doing with this? Is this fascinating? Is it interesting? Is it fun? Are you finding yourself going, wow, this is cool? Devin says yes. Yeah. So cool, right? So cool. Very interesting, fascinating. Yeah. So cool. It's so much fun to learn, and it's even more fun to implement. So the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System is the only live, online, fully mentored course for, read this, as people who have a college level anatomy and physiology course already under their belt, who want to streamline their clinical work without sacrificing client care. Could you see, as we worked through those cases, how we could get deep fast, get the work done in the appointment, and build from one appointment to the next without spending time writing reports, writing cases, creating protocols on our own time? Yeah, we don't want to do that. So we do this because we want you to stop working unpaid overtime creating programs if you already do that. We want to create programs that our clients can stick with and get success with, that they can be compliant with, because that's going to give us long-term retention. It's going to give them long-term results, and it's going to give us long-term retention. So if you want to learn more than just iris markers, if you want to learn how the markers play off each other, and if you want to be mentored in this process, not just come to class, but have opportunities to be mentored, to bring cases for discussion, for us to talk through things and support you, then we need to talk. I've designed the course specifically for people who have anatomy and physiology. I will only take you in the course if you've got ANP. If you are a professional member of CanPro, I know you've got your ANP. That suffices beautifully. When you've got the ANP, we can go so much deeper, so much faster. And I don't have time to teach ANP in the course, right? I want to teach you the markers. I want to teach you how they work together. I want to teach you to think through an iris assessment so that you intuitively get to know what are the questions you need to ask, what are the things you want to watch for, what are some of the recommendations you want to follow up with, right? We never use iridology to diagnose. We always use it to guide the process. It's an assessment tool. The curriculum in dynamic iridology is designed to prepare you to certify with the International Iridology Practitioners Association if certification is important to you. The next course is starting just in 10 days, like on the 27th. Registration is open now, and you only get to register if you talk to me personally. And so, I meant to put that here instead, just a minute. And I'm putting that link in the chat box. It's an opportunity for you to meet with me online on a Zoom call, for us to talk about your goals, to talk about where you're at, how you see iridology coming into your practice, what you think it will do for you, really for us to give you a campus tour and to see if this is a good fit for you, right? That is so important to me, that it's a good fit for you, for me, that you're a good fit in our community. So important. And I'm pretty sure that if you're in CanPro, you're probably a good fit all the way around, but I would still want to meet with you. So again, we're going to talk about you and your goals, and then see how well the course will fit with you. So if you choose the option for certification preparation, that is where the course is taught through live webinars, 2.25 to 2.5 hour live webinar classes that are recorded for playback on demand. I limit it to no more than 10 students per cohort. With this mentored option, you will have the opportunity, if you want to join us, for group mentoring twice each month, where you can bring questions and cases that you're working on. And it might be iridology, it might be business, it might be what iridology camera should you buy, or you bought a camera, how do you use it? All those kinds of things that are extra beyond the curriculum, we handle in the group mentoring. We have, it's not MeWe. I didn't update this. We have a private community, not on MeWe anymore, in a place where we can say what we want to say. We don't get censored. You receive the downloadable digital textbook, 225 pages, which you are welcome to print up if you would like, and 45 pages of study notes. We call them the cheat sheets. They're kind of like a Coles Notes, Cliff Notes thing that's give you the synopsis of the course in 45 pages. And again, the option to enroll at the level where you get the certification to be, or the mentoring rather, to be certified with the International Iridology Practitioners Association. This is all designed to help you not just learn iridology, but to become confident and competent and really to help you be a better iridologist than I was when I started. I didn't have nearly 50 hours of training when I started. It wasn't available. And I want that for you. I absolutely want that for you. Sophia Perez-Viller, one of my students, posted this on the IIPA website. Judith, the commitment that Judith has for teaching is extraordinary, and the amount of support you get in the certification course is fabulous. The material is clear and thorough. The pace is dynamic, enough time to integrate all the parts. Sophia came already having been certified in iridology through another organization. She said, my course exceeded her expectations. I've learned lots from the course, expanded my knowledge, gained more confidence, and I see it's helped, or she says it's helped her to be better with her clients and to design her protocols much more quickly. So cool, right? I love that. Kimberly Zadels, I got to tell you, Kimberly is lovely. I was a little intimidated when I brought her into the course. She has got more alphabet soup behind her name than I know how to pronounce. One of them is she has a master's degree as a radiology assistant. So she's got medical training and about 20 other alternative holistic degrees behind her belt. If you are wondering which iridology course to take, you can stop looking. You've found it. Judith is an excellent instructor with many years of experience. She's a caring and compassionate person who's dedicated to the field of iridology and her students. I personally practice both Eastern and Western physiology medicine and was very impressed with the layout of her program. That meant a lot coming from Kimberly. She makes it easy for her students to balance work, life, and study. Sharon Bimrose was a certified iridologist and a naturopath from Australia. We've changed the name of the course. She'd already taken iridology as a part of her naturopathy. Dynamic iridology surpassed her previous training in structure, content delivery, documentation, and support. I taught the way she could learn, was well delivered, and it gave structure to knowledge that she had, but she hadn't been taught how to integrate it yet, right? Most up-to-date information, and she'd already been trained, and she recognized that this was moving her forward in absolute appreciation for making me a better iridologist. Love that too. So here we go. Now, I've given you that link in the chat box. If you're interested in learning more, if you're thinking, yeah, I think I want to do this. I think I want to go that way. I want to learn iridology to use it in my practice. Grab that link from the chat box, schedule a time. Let's talk. I promise you it's not a high pressure sales pitch. Let's talk. Let's see if it fits. And if it does, I will invite you to enroll in the February 27th start date. I look forward to speaking with you soon. I just want to know, final chance, any last comments here before we shut it down for the evening? Any final comments? Thank you for all your participation today. That's really been wonderful. You're welcome, Devin. My pleasure. You're welcome, Maria. Glad to have you. Tennille, you're welcome. This is so good, so good. I really do hope that I will be speaking with many of you in the next few days so that we can see if this is the right thing and possibly get you enrolled and have you in our next cohort. I look forward to speaking with you soon. Do make it a great evening. We'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.